Hi, everyone. Welcome to today's GSV Startup Academy presented by Cooley. I'm Hannah, VP at GSV Ventures, and I'm joined today by Fran Rosenberg, co-founder of the AI Show. And then we'll hear from Naomi May, our partner at Cooley, later on in this session. So we're about a month away from the ASU+GSV Summit and the AI Show. So we wanted to use the time today to dedicate this session to helping you set yourself up for success at the event and explain why attending truly is a game changer for startups, like our title suggests. So Fran and I are going to share some tips, call outs on making the most of both events. We'll hear from Naomi, who will share some insights and her legal perspective from her time in the ed tech space. And then we'll come back for some Q&A. So as a reminder, please feel free to drop any questions in the chat and we will try and get to those at the end. Awesome. So for those attending for the first time, I just want to give a little bit of context for what ASU+GSV is and means. So the heart of this summit is an almost 2-decade-long partnership between GSV and Arizona State University. And we've been aligned on a single mission, which is to create a world where all people have equal access to the future. And this has really guided our goal of connecting educators, entrepreneurs, investors, policymakers, and technology leaders at the summit. And this marks our 16th annual summit. And as with each year, there's a specific theme. So this year's theme is learning at the speed of light, which reflects a new inflection point we've reached, the powerful intersection of AI and education that has allowed us to enter an era where ubiquitous, continuous learning is not just possible, but becoming a reality. And you can see some of the themes that are outlined below that have helped curate our sessions, panelists, and programming for this year. So for those of you who have not attended in the past, I want to share a few stats about last year's event so you can truly understand the magnitude and size of this summit. Last year, there were over 7,000 attendees across the EdTech ecosystem, 800 speakers sharing insights and perspectives at 180 sessions, covering everything from early stage funding to scaling global education solutions. We had 18 stages running concurrent programming and dozens of official and unofficial receptions and events. So if I were an ed tech early stage founder today, would be wondering, how am I going to make the most out of this event? So today I want to cover how are you going to navigate an event of this size, meeting with investors, and what programming is really most relevant to you. So the first point, which we cannot stress enough, is please download the app. It's available in the App Store and the Google Play Store, also available on desktop. And the GSV Summit team has done an amazing job of making this really accessible and useful for you throughout the summit. So here you can find a comprehensive agenda of all sessions. You'll have your own personalized schedule where you can pull in different sessions that you want to attend. One note is that as you add different sessions to your schedule, this doesn't guarantee you entry, but it is a good way to see, how you might want to plan your day and navigate around the hotel. So 2 points I want to call out. The first is new this year. It's this screenshot of the discussion page. So we have different community chats, higher ed, K-12, workforce, founders and entrepreneurs, and many more. So before you attend the event, it's a great way to introduce yourself, familiarize yourself with other folks that are attending. And then when in San Diego, you can go on, see where different folks are meeting up. And it's a great way to do some more informal networking. The other thing, which is sort of our most asked question of how do I meet with investors? How do I meet with buyers of my product, whether that's K-12, higher ed, consumer, or workforce? There is an attendee list. So in the app, it is kept up to date. So keep in mind that we are still a month out from the actual event. So it's not at maximum capacity yet. You can go on, see the names of different folks that are attending, their job titles, and where they work. And that's a great way to either message them directly on the app, or you have their information and you can reach out via LinkedIn. In terms of programming, like I said, 18 stages, nearly 200 sessions. There's always something to be doing. We have a few different events that are curated specifically for our entrepreneur community, and more so than that, our early stage community. So the first is building and investing in ed tech. This track is going to run across all 3 days with sessions designed for companies at every stage. So whether you've yet to raise a seed round or you're scaling a late stage company, some sessions I highly recommend attending: what does it take to secure your first institutional funding round, or Founders Therapy, which is a candid discussion about the challenges of startup life. You can see at the bottom here, there's also some different community activations for the entrepreneur group: opening night reception, investors happy hours, a lot of different ways that are formal and informal to gather at the event and meet different folks either building in the space or investors. Other stage here that is really popular is Star Track. This will happen all day Tuesday, features 7 panels of the CEOs of the companies that you see on screen here. These are really well curated discussions about underlying trends and inflection points shaping the future of learning. This is our 3rd year doing this event, and we originally started it with the goal of attracting more institutional investors to Summit. So not only is it a great way to get in the room with some of the brightest folks in the ed tech space, but also a great way to get in front of other investors. And then lastly, a little bit on the earlier side of things, is the GSV Cup, which is presented by AWS. So for those of you who don't know, GSV hosts an early stage ed tech competition each year. We receive almost 2,000 nominations, and from those, we selected the top 50 that we see as the most game-changing and innovative in the ed tech startup community. Those are pictured here on the right. And all day Tuesday, these folks will be doing live demos. And so you can get a chance to go and see these companies in action, talk to the founders, and really get a sense for how these people are thinking about building in the pre-K to grade space. So with that, I will turn it over to Fran, who can walk us through a little bit about what to expect at the AI Show.
Yeah, thanks so much, Hannah. And if you guys could go to the next slide. I think that was a great summary. You know, surprise, surprise, AI Show has its own app. So I would definitely recommend you download that separately. I would also just stress that if you are registered for ASU+GSV Summit, you're automatically registered for AI Show. And if you are not able to attend Summit, but you are in the area, AI Show is actually free to attend, but you do need to register separately on our site. The 2 events are very much related and sister events, but have different vibes and serve different purposes for ed tech entrepreneurs. Here's some high-level stats on the show itself. As opposed to being in a hotel, AI Show is at the convention center down the street. As opposed to being, you know, only for the 7,000 most you know, high-level people in education, this event is more for the masses. And it's really an opportunity for you to interface with, you know, more of that mid-layer, you know, the SVPs, the VPs, the directors, the teachers, the parents, the professors, your users, versus maybe, you know, their boss's boss, on all things AI and EDU. The event takes place at the San Diego Convention Center. It's about a 10-minute walk. And you can see some of these awesome statistics on, I guess, the community that we've built. You know, AI Show is in its 2nd year, and we're really excited to welcoming you all there. I think it'll be a really special opportunity to engage in conversations around how to bring innovation into action in education, so that we can drive outcomes for students and reduce costs and create leverage for learning leaders. Next slide, please. So Hannah and I just wanted to walk you guys through some GSV hints and tips on Summit and Show. And I'm sure, Naomi, you know, you'll be able to add to this too when you come on, you know, given your experience. But just some basic stuff to get in your mind. People's calendars fill up fast. Mine is already like half scheduled. I'm sure Hannah's is too. Start booking your meetings now. You need to sort of get into that app that Hannah talked about and that I talked about at Show. Figure out who it is you're looking to meet with. You know, connect with them on the app. If they don't connect with you on the app because maybe they haven't taken the time to go through it. Maybe look them up on LinkedIn and use Sales Navigator to get at them. Maybe try to find a warm introduction to that key person that you're trying to land a meeting with. Use those Apollo, Lusha type sales tools to get any info you can on how to best reach them, and try to get those things booked. That would be, I think, my number one advice. Number two is the summit is quite busy, as is AI Show. Once you get there, feel things out. You know, when I land a meeting with this investor or with this district leader, with this university chancellor or whomever, you're going to need to host that meeting in a place. And, you know, if it's a serious meeting, you might want that place to be somewhat quiet. This is something I would recommend you walk around, scout out a place that is somewhat easy for you to find, and host that meeting there. I've seen startups, you know, parked up on the third floor when they have their own calls, you know, CEOs who need to talk to their team. A lot of people are leveraging the seating space we have outside of the hotel in the back. We've built this awesome town square on the first floor of the summit to facilitate meetings and things like that. There's a cafe there with really nice cappuccinos as well. As we go down the list here, clothes. This is probably goes without saying, but you're going to meet people that you want to present well in front of. So I would wear clothes that I would want to be wearing while I'm doing an important pitch or meeting with an important VC, but also that I'm comfortable, you know, maybe walking my 10,000 steps in. I would not recommend super uncomfy shoes. Lots of people are wearing, you know, their Air Force Ones or whatever that means to you. I don't know, Hannah, on your side, you know, but if you have any recommendations, but yeah, for sure, you want to present well, but you also need to be able to walk those steps. On food, the summit provides coffee and, you know, there's box lunches, there's seated lunches in StageX, there's breakfast. Not as much on the dinner side. There's tons of ecosystem dinners and parties at night, some of which I know, you know, Naomi might dive into, but there is not at AI Show. Since it's free, you do need to buy your own food. A couple more, the AI Show and the summit are co-located, but they are like 10 minutes away walking. So I wouldn't stack yourself with a meeting, you know, 8 to 8:30 a.m. at Summit, 8:30 to 9 at Show, because you'll be late. So give yourself that time in between to walk between the venues, which I would highly encourage you do. My last tip, and then I'll pass it back to Hannah and Naomi, is make your own luck. You'll really get out what you put into this experience. If you just show up and you expect the world to come to you, it won't. You need to sort of do this pre-work in terms of booking yourself meetings, setting your agenda the way Hannah talked about, researching the people that you're going to meet with prior so that you can crush that 30 minutes that you nailed with them, in order to make the most of the investment you've made of your time and your money into joining us at this event. And if you do, I'm sure it'll all work out. So with that, I'll pass it back to you, Hannah.
Awesome. Thanks, Brandon. Definitely echo everything you said. Definitely wear comfortable walking shoes and dress in layers. That is sort of my advice on the clothing piece. It's hot in San Diego, but can be very, very cold in the conference rooms. So just want to round this out with, again, a pretty frequently asked question, which is, how do I craft a compelling pitch? What does GSV care about when investing in startups? And obviously this can vary a little bit firm to firm, but I think that these are pretty good basics to ground yourself in when thinking about pitching to investors, whether that's at the summit or afterwards. So GSV believes in what we call the 5 Ps: people, product, potential, predictability, and purpose. And we use these to guide all of our investment decisions. So whether we're meeting a company for the first time, we have this in the back of our minds, or, you know, we're really seriously diligencing a company, this is what's going to guide our investment memo. So these are somewhat self-explanatory, but can kind of just tick through these. So on the people side, we're thinking about who's on the team, what is their experience, What unique backgrounds are they bringing together to this solution that we think will allow them to execute? As folks who are on the call know, the ed tech space can be a pretty challenging market. And so investing in entrepreneurs that demonstrate they can pivot and navigate the challenges of the market are going to be really important. Product side, what are you building? What is your solution and how does it differentiate? Is it on the tech side? It's becoming increasingly harder to differentiate on tech. Is it the UX UI choices? What's going to drive user engagement, growth, and how are you demonstrating that to your investors? Potential, this is really just thinking about the size of the opportunity. So even if people are amazing and product is amazing and you gain 100% market share in the area you're targeting, is that really only going to max you out at 10 million in revenue? That's to say, is this a niche solution to a niche problem? So thinking about the long-term vision of these products and solutions and how can they really be big and kind of get those venture returns. On predictability. So it's obviously great for us to be able to understand, how is past performance? How does that dictate future growth? And is there a really clear growth story to the company? So in an ideal world, you have multi-year contracts and recurring revenue. At the early stage, obviously, a lot of times this isn't possible. You're doing beta testing, you're doing pilots. And so I think a really good solution in lieu of this is to have a really clear articulation of your operating metrics or leading indicators. So if you're a tutoring company, you have a really clear sense of how many students are using your solution, how often they're using it, weekly average users, monthly active users, daily active users, how long those sessions are. And then you can point to that data and how that will later translate into revenue down the line for your investors. And then finally, purpose. This one is pretty obvious, but the alignment with the GSV mission, which is that everyone has access to an equitable future and learning. So we say ROE, return on education at GSV, and we really are focused on companies and people that are supporting learning for all. So that's a pretty quick overview, and obviously happy to answer, any questions on that as we go to Q&A, but want to turn it over to Naomi, who's attended Summit many times and certainly has her own set of tips and tricks for the event.
Hi, everyone. I'm so excited to see you all in person soon. My name is Naomi May. I am a partner in the Education and Ed Tech Group at Cooley LLP. Joining me at the summit are colleagues from our global private companies practice, venture capital, litigation, and more. I'm not sure what it says about me, but ASU+GSV week is one of my very favorite weeks of the entire year. The energy is electric, the panels are engaging, the networking is as intense as it gets, and you can't walk through the lobby without seeing 20 people you know. I thought I would run through a few pointers that we have seen over our years attending the summit and participating and advising our clients as they navigate what is a really exciting experience for early stage founders. Before the summit, hopefully you've been working on the lead up. It's never too early, but it's also not too late. I would say top pointers, and Hannah already touched on this, polish your non-confidential deck. Make sure it's up to date, it's accurate, it has updated anticipated milestones. If you need to, review it with your board, with any advisors, possibly in addition to management. Also, maybe consider getting some non-disclosure agreements in place. You can visit our free resources at cooleygo.com. We have a bunch of free short form articles and a document generator that might be helpful. Get your elevator pitch down, clearly articulate, as Hannah said, what differentiates you, and also keep your message succinct. You'll come across people in the hallway, so keep your message to what can be communicated in a short handshake and in passing. And also focus on what is new with your story, with your platform. A lot of us have been seeing each other in recent weeks. I saw a lot of you in San Francisco a couple weeks ago. I'm here at South by this week, and a lot of this, there's a lot of development that happens during these weeks. And so prepare to discuss what's new with any potential investors and folks who are interested in what you're doing. During the summit, make sure to come to meetings prepared. I would, if you're meeting with an investor, for example, review all the recently announced financings of that investor, understand what they've been focusing on, understand what the roles of all the people attending the meeting play in the organization. Make sure to keep notes on your meetings. It's the simple things, and not just what was said. You can tell a lot from who attended, who was invited, all the insights you might be able to glean from body language that you can't necessarily see through Zoom. It's different in person. Also take note of all the topics that you cover during the meetings. From a legal perspective, I would say one thing to avoid though, unless you're actively negotiating a term sheet, which we often do with our clients at ASU+GSV, but don't discuss value unless you have confirmed with your board and advisors in terms of what your terms will be. Don't get ahead of yourself in terms of deal structure until you've made sure going in that you're ready to discuss those things. Also rely on your internal networks. I know all of us at Cooley love making connections. It is one of the most fun parts of my job. And we can help you do that too, in addition to all of your board members and investors. Just lean into those who are already backing your company. Also attend what you're invited to. There are a lot of external events and receptions, and they're great ways to have conversations with those you know, and also those you may not know, and those you might not be able to get a formal meeting with. Those in-person meetings can really be invaluable, even if they're in a group setting. After the summit, make sure to follow up, send any materials, decks, information you promised to share during the meetings, and also make sure to schedule follow-ups. And then, of course, last but not least, count the days until the next summit. As I mentioned at the start, my team will be there. We love to meet with founders and teams in our conference suite at the Hyatt, and we'll see many of you there, if not on the Midway at our party. I'll see y'all soon.
Yeah, I mean, I would just triple down on what Naomi just went through, especially around the power of one, warm connection. You know, if you are expecting that the managing partner of whatever venture fund is going to respond to your in-mail in the Summit's app, I might recommend a rethink of that strategy. And people like Naomi, who you work with, know these people, right? And so like I just couldn't, triple down on your advice there more, as well as around these external events. Like Cooley hosts an amazing event. One call out I have on that I don't know if we make clear enough, and so I'd love to say it here. If you, when you registered, elected to not share your information with our partners, we can't provide it to these people hosting external parties, and they can't invite you to those parties. So you can always amend your registration if you're interested in being invited to all the cool stuff that our amazing partners are leading, not only within the hotel, but around the city over those 7 days. It really starts Friday night and ends Thursday even. And whether it be a dinner or, I don't know if you guys have been to this party on the Midway, it's pretty sweet. But I would just highly recommend you consider doing that, although you will receive like a ton of emails. On the flip side, we've got some pretty sweet questions coming in on the chat. Maybe Hannah, I'll take the first one, and then I could popcorn to the two of you on the rest of them if that's a cool format.
Yeah.
Will the app be able to use AI to ask who is most appropriate to connect with or what sessions to attend? The Summits app, unfortunately, doesn't have as great of an AI recommendation engine, but the AI Shows app does. And on theme. So definitely the AI Show can hook you up with these AI-enabled recommendations based on how you tagged yourself and how people tagged each other. On the Summit side, there's a whole ton of other ways to filter, which I think is a great segue into question number 2. Hannah, what's the best way to filter on VCs or schools in the attendee list?
Yeah, so this is a great question. I downloaded the app yesterday, tried it out myself. If you go to the attendee list and search the keywords that you're looking for, school, district, investor, those people will pop up. Like Fran said, some of this is making your own luck. So these people are not going to be kind of served to you on a silver platter. You do need to do the work, do some research on which investors are relevant to you. If you're a very early stage pre-seed company, probably doesn't make sense to be pitching a growth stage equity fund. Same thing with if you're selling into public school districts, I wouldn't spend a lot of time talking to independent schools or charters. And so there will be some kind of sifting through these various contacts, but there are thousands of people in there, and there's going to be a lot of great people for you all to talk to. I think going off of that, there was another question in here that's kind of related, but it's asking about tips on forming partnerships for scaling in early childhood and special needs ed tech. And so I want to broaden this one a little bit, just because I don't know your specific circumstances, but I'm sure there's a lot of folks listening that are seeking very specific connections with very specific people. And so I do want to call out something that the summit does a wonderful job of, which is having communities. And I touched on this a little bit with the discussion feature in the app, but we have a K-12 community, a higher ed community, a workforce community, a few others. And these different communities have various events throughout the summit. And so I encourage you to go into the app and see what they're offering. For example, the K-12 community at ASU+GSV has over 1,000 K-12 leaders on site. The higher ed community has 300 plus higher ed techs registered, hundreds of presidents, chancellors, provosts, and there's 40 different sessions dedicated to higher ed. To your specific question on the early childhood side, we have a specific programming dedicated to the early childhood education. So folks like PBS and Age of Learning and Sesame Street are going to be there. So I encourage you to go onto the app, see what speakers are going to be there, really leverage those different discussion forums I talked about, and then reach out to those folks so you can make connections.
Yeah, and I guess Naomi, as a longtime attendee, but maybe someone not at GSV, do you have any insights on there's 7,000 people. How do I, what should I do? I'm sure you have an incredibly strategic calendar set up. Would be awesome if you could share a little bit of that wisdom with the group.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, what I would say is come in with a plan. Because if you come in and just try to do everything, you're not going to be able to really develop those deep relationships, have those meaningful meetings, and actually make the most of your time. So I would start by setting a few priorities, right? Maybe you're not fundraising right now. Maybe it's more an opportunity to learn about what companies are doing in terms of new technology or innovations, or maybe you want to meet with some of the folks who are more on the policy side because you're trying to design your product in a way that takes into account what's ahead. So I would think about what are your priorities and then try to bucket things out. Say, what are the sessions that are relevant? Don't try to attend every session. Say, what am I personally trying to get out for my company of this conference, and then prioritize based on that. And then also do the same with all the attendees in alignment with those priorities. And obviously, I know for me, there's always the folks that I want to see every single time. So they always find a place on the schedule. But I would also say make some room within your schedule for those impromptu meetings that you might not expect. So start with the priorities, but also be a little bit flexible, because there will be times where some great opportunity will come up, and it's a real bummer if you can't fit it in. So also schedule in some blocks of times around your priorities that allow you to take advantage of those moments.
100%, couldn't agree more. And just one other comment on the priorities. I think a lot of startups come into ASU+GSV Summit thinking that the thing that's going to provide me value is investor meetings. And that's sort of the tunnel vision that I hear from a lot of the groups that I've developed relationships with over the last three or so years. I couldn't more strongly recommend you think beyond just the investor community. That's going to be very important. There's the, EdTech's happy hour on Monday. That's a great time. And scheduling those meetings as we've laid out. But you could also meet with nonprofits. You could also meet with funders. You could also meet with policymakers. You could also meet with companies that are more mature than yours, who maybe in 3 years could be part of your exit strategy. You could meet with, you could have an in-person meeting with your legal team about a critical issue and save yourself a couple flights. You could, all types of stuff that's just beyond, I'm here to raise money and that's all I'm doing. You could even learn from senior leaders in your target industry that maybe you're not ready to pitch yet. Have a conversation with that university president or superintendent or CLO. That's not, will you buy my thing? Will you pilot my thing? What's top of mind for you? Go to that session that you're actually interested in, because Hannah and the Summit team have spent 1,000 hours curating these conversations, for your benefit. So I think that the priorities thing couldn't be more important. Let's keep going down the line here. I think we've covered it. Someone's asking for investor lists. We only share the opt-in list of attendees with our partners. But that said, go to the mobile app, look up those titles, look up those firms. That's a cool place for you to see who's coming and things like that. Another question on the invites to private parties, just to restate it, if you've not opted in to sharing your information with partners, we follow those rules and don't. So you can always go back to your registration and amend that choice if you'd like to be considered by all these partners who are creating those parties. I've got a question in here on, I'm considering coming to the summit, including ticket price. How much do you think all this would cost? That's a great question. I think, it depends on where you're coming from. If you can drive or fly, I think that'd make a big difference. I also know that hotels, probably a little cheaper if you maybe booked in advance. The Manchester Grand Hyatt, where the summit is at, is completely sold out. But we have a whole plethora of hotel options, from the Best Western to the Omni. And so depending on how you like to roll, it could all cost differently. The summit tickets are $2,200, I think, for entrepreneurs. And I know hotels in California can run you $200-$300 a night at least, probably a little more, especially at this late hour. So definitely keep that in mind. That said, I usually get done 3 to 4 months of my year's meetings in these 3 days. And it's definitely, for me, enables me to drive value for GSV in unique ways that I couldn't without attending. So I would consider it if I'm you. I've got another question in here on recordings. Yes, we are recording this and we will be sharing it with partners. I've got another question in here, or not with partners, with all of you, on, I guess, one of the comments that was mentioned about the decks and confidentiality and stuff. Hannah, I think I could ask you, and then Naomi, maybe I could ask you as well for your perspective. And I get this a lot from people who are like, should I make an investor sign an NDA before a meeting, as an example? I have my opinion, but Hannah, could you talk for 2 minutes about when you go into an initial meeting with a startup, what level of information are you, maybe expecting them to share? And maybe what are some of those rules of the game that when they aren't followed, maybe suggest to you that this entrepreneur isn't ready for an investment, that maybe everyone will want to be aware of? And then Naomi, I'll pass that one to you.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think a couple things. One, it obviously depends what is the nature of the meeting is in terms of how much I expect is going to be shared and sort of what the levels of confidentiality are. Obviously, I think a great rule of thumb for all of these meetings is expect a very high level of confidentiality. People are trusting you with a lot of their sensitive information. This is a very competitive space. And I think if folks find out that you're sharing a lot of their personal information with competitors, it's really going to create challenges for you down the line. So I think one example is if I'm catching up with a startup that is not interested in raising right now, probably not interested in raising for a year, and we're just catching up about how they are, they probably won't be sharing those very specific key metrics with me, quite honestly. They might give me ranges, a sort of a sense of how things are going, but I'm not going to be asking very pointed questions. I think if, we have a meeting and we really like the company and we start to move into the diligence phase, that's when we're going to be starting to expect data rooms or, very detailed answers to a lot of our questions. Some of that, depending on the stage in which the company's in, is going to require a formalized NDA. We've done those several times. And I think it's all a little bit dependent on the situation and sort of what the founder's interested in. But I think kind of the unspoken rule of thumb, always good to fall back on, is assume the highest level of confidentiality with the information you're handling, especially with AI, putting any of that sensitive information into ChatGPT, Claude, et cetera, because like I said, it's all very confidential and competitive. But Naomi, with very specific legal advice, I'd love to turn that to you.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know this is not super satisfying, but it depends. It depends on the circumstances. It depends on what you're going in to discuss. If you're starting out with an initial introduction to the company, asking someone to sign an NDA is probably offensive. On the flip side, if you're walking in to negotiate a term sheet, by all means, that would be appropriate. So I do think it depends, and I'll just reiterate everything Hannah said in terms of considerations and also the expectation that folks are expecting both to receive information that's highly confidential, but also to have very robust conversations that are not necessarily just surface level. So I do think that it takes a pretty I would think about it carefully and not just assume that, I'm going to have a conversation with this investor. I'm going to ask them when I walk in to sign the NDA. On the flip side, like I said, if you are actually walking in to talk real terms, that's really when it's more appropriate.
Awesome. I think that was pretty clear and couldn't agree more. For sure. I think if you're going into meetings, asking for NDAs, you probably won't land those meetings. And by the way, you sort of want investors to be talking about your company to each other, to senior leaders that they interact with, and they can't, obviously, if you have them under those sorts of terms. Where can you change your selection about if partners can contact you? Someone was paying attention. You go to modify your registration link in your confirmation email, or on the registration page, there is an existing registrant button. And if that doesn't work, you could email Danielle on our team, who's also put together this lovely webinar. Thank you, Danielle. That is DANIELLE@gsv.com. And she could help you change your election there. I think we are pretty great on questions. Hannah, Naomi, any closing thoughts other than totally pumped to hang out? Otherwise, I think we can close. But if you guys have any, I think now's the time.
Don't forget to enjoy yourself. Have fun, because it is a blast.
Yeah. Looking forward to seeing everyone in San Diego soon. And thank you so much to Naomi and the entire Cooley team. They make these webinars possible, and they're hosted throughout the year. An amazing way for us to be able to engage with you all outside of the summit. So we're incredibly appreciative and looking forward to seeing everyone at the Cooley party in San Diego.
I do think I have one more thing. Put on your schedule and on your radar, the GSV Cup 2026 applications will likely come out in August or September. So I would definitely think about, making a nomination for yourself there. And yeah, we'll look forward to seeing you. And thanks again to Naomi, Cooley, and Hannah and Danielle. And we'll hang out soon. All the best.